So our meditation today, I'm going to be sharing from our book, Welcoming the Unwelcome. I'm going to be sharing our meditation from the back of the book, and it's going to be from the basic sitting meditation. So if you like what you hear, you will have this to practice as we go through our book study over the next few weeks. All right, so now let's just begin to settle into our meditation and just begin to relax our bodies, and remember to not force the breath, just to let it flow naturally as it is. Just begin to sit upright and close your eyes or find a spot to gaze, whichever's the most comfortable for you, and just resting the hands on the thighs. Just simply becoming aware of the breath as it goes in and out of the lungs. Just being here in this present moment with that breath, with each and every breath. Nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, just present in this moment with each and every breath. Just becoming more and more relaxed. Feeling the expansion of the chest and the softness with each breath. Silently affirming, be right here with the breath as it moves in and out. Saying silently to yourself, I am fully present. I am right here, right now, with whatever is going on. Allowing other sounds to come, maybe sounds on the street or the lights in the room. Knowing that it's okay for those things to capture your attention slightly, but we remain with the breath. And as we prepare to enter into a moment of silence, I invite you to just continue to sit here. Just be here and right now, aware of each and every breath, moving in and moving out as we move into our moment of silence. and as we draw our attention and our focus back to this present moment, we know that we always have the breath to go back to. Despite what's going on in our outside world, in the material world, we always have the breath. That breath that is part of our connection with God or the divine, the universe, with Source. We always have connection to the breath, to be present in each and every moment, in each and every circumstance. And in this we are grateful. And so it is. Namaste. And let's just continue to be present with that breath as we go into our time of the New Lord's Prayer together. I think most of you know by now that was Joe Dieter, and he is one of our board trustees. And I just wanted to give a special shout out again to the board. It's been, COVID kind of threw us off what we expected, but, working with this board has been a true pleasure to me. They have been so helpful. I enjoy the fact that we've been able to work so well together. They've created surveys and special music, and, Nancy's done such a good job of keeping our, finances together. And please, let's give people on the board a special hand today for all that they've done. Yeah. And have helped keep me sane, too. I will add that. So I appreciate them. And I appreciate our congregation, too, because all of you, I get these wonderful cards in the mail and these emails, and it's just, you are this congregation. It's not just a minister. It's not just the board. It's all of us, right? Each and every one of us. This is our congregation. So thank you all. I am so grateful, just so grateful as we move through this time together. So today is a fun Sunday. It is the kickoff of our fall book study, something we've been talking about a little while here. And we're going to be studying and discussing Pema Chodron's Welcoming the Unwelcome. And Pema is a Buddhist nun, and she's written several books. I think this is the first one she's written in a few years, but it looks wonderful. I've read just the first chapters. I'm going to stay with everybody else in the book study, so I'm really excited that we're going to be reading this and studying this. And it's really an applicable book title for today, isn't it? Who's had a little bit of practice in welcoming the unwelcome lately? And it's really not just today. I mean, honestly, no matter what's going on, whether it's COVID or anything else, there's always going to be times in our lives where we're having to really practice and really welcome the unwelcome and really find out what that is for each one of us and how that's aiding our spiritual growth as we move along through life. So she starts off really well. In chapter 1, she starts off with this quote: "Our aim is to fully awaken our heart and mind, not just for our own greater well-being, but also to bring benefit, solace, and wisdom to other living beings. What motivation could top that?" So it sounds like a pretty good thing, right? A pretty good motivation. And she starts with a couple of things in that. She mentions aim and she mentions motivation. So those are kind of good to know in most situations, right? I mean, we generally start most things with some kind of an aim or a motivation. Even being here or tuning in here today, for instance, being here in this building or tuning in online, we have an aim. Whether that aim is spiritual growth, or infusing our lives with more love or understanding, maybe learning more about even how to work on forgiveness. We had some kind of motivation for being here today. Regardless as to what it is, you've got your goal in mind. You've got your aim and your motivation. Maybe it's personal to you, and that's fine. But there's the motivation, maybe it's to feel more peaceful. Maybe it's to practice, our love just a little bit more, to release things that don't serve us. Maybe we're trying to release some hurt or some anger. Again, regardless as to what it is, you've got motivation of some kind. You've got your aim, you've got your intention. Now, Ms. Chadron tells us that it's wise to know our intentions, especially when we engage with spiritual teachings. She mentions something called bodhicitta, body meaning awake in Sanskrit, and sita meaning heart. So our aim then becomes, according to Ms. Chadron, to fully awaken to our heart and mind, not just for our own greater well-being, but also to bring benefit, solace, and wisdom to other living beings. Now, I'm thinking that sounds like some pretty good motivation, isn't it? We always want to bring those things to our lives and to other beings that we share this planet with and this lifetime with. Now, I don't claim to be a Buddhist, but I do know that the Buddha taught that our essence is good. And that kind of reminds me of something else that I'm going to mention, and I hope somebody at least thought about it in the back of their mind. But it's a specific unity teaching. I bet y'all have heard of it, even if you haven't thought of it yet, you'll probably know it when I say it. The second of our unity 5 basic principles. And I know some people took the new membership class, so should remember those. But anyway, I'm not naming any names. But it states our essence is of God. Therefore, we are inherently good. This God essence was fully expressed in Jesus the Christ. In this inherent goodness, it also drives our need to be there for others as well, doesn't it? Think about natural disasters for a moment. People aren't typically walking around asking people, that need help, hey, what religion or spiritual practice do you practice? What political party do you support? We don't typically go up and ask people those things when they're experiencing a natural disaster. People generally just jump in and help without even honestly thinking about those things. And to do that is really in alignment of that inherent goodness. And it's living from that place. So what happens though when something gets in the way of us truly being able to be there, of being present for others? Sometimes what I like to call our junk that gets in the way. We all know what that junk sometimes is. It gets in the way. Mindy and I, we'll sometimes, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, but we'll sometimes watch that show called Hoarders. And Mindy's tuning in upstairs. She had some work she had to do, so she's tuning up there. So I'm going to say this because I probably won't get in trouble until later on because she's not in here right now. But Mindy watches it more than me. Okay? During the absolute abundance class, Mindy was downstairs watching Hoarders. So anyway. And Mindy's my wife, in case anybody wants to know. But in that show, people are often suffering from some kind of a trauma usually. And it's a trauma in their lives, and it manifests by creating these hoards within their homes. And they're just surrounded by what I call junk lots of times. They don't look at it that way, but other people do. They don't want to be. They don't want to be surrounded by the stuff that they're surrounded by in their homes. They want to be rid of it. But for underlying reasons, usually a trauma of some kind, they often just have trouble letting it go. Some find a comfort in it, in having that stuff around them. Some find that, it reminds them of an attachment to another time in their lives, maybe a time that they felt was better in their lives. But whatever it is, they have trouble letting it go. It's that junk that's preventing them from moving forward in their lives, but it's also comforting to them for one reason or the other. And they also find that this condition will prevent them from being there for others lots of times. They begin to shun family and friends, and sometimes when they have children living in the home, CPS gets involved. And sometimes they even lose their children. It can actually get to where it's at that level. And they begin to not even be present for themselves, much less anybody else. Now, Ms. Chadron tells us that, I'm going to probably fumble up on saying some of these Sanskrit words sometimes, but bodhicitta, the awakened heart, begins with the wish to be free from whatever gets in the way of helping others. We long to be free from the confused thoughts and habitual patterns that cover up our basic goodness, so that we can be less reactive, less fearful, and less stuck in our old ways. So there we have a motivation. We have an aim. Kind of like what we talked about last week, right, with having that end result in mind. We've got that end result in mind, and we now just have to chart our course to get to that end result. And that can start with bodhicitta. So our book mentions that we arouse bodhicitta by beginning with a broken heart. That initially sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? Begin with a broken heart. What? Who wants to have a broken heart in the first place? And how, pray tell, do we think we can arouse something good by having a broken heart? But remember what I said about the people that are on that hoarder show. They often didn't want to release the objects around them because it brought them comfort. To let go of these objects would mean that they would have to endure a pain of some kind. Pain of letting go of that stuff, or pain of facing whatever it is that was causing the hoarding condition in the first place. So they used their stuff as a means of protecting themselves and from going through that pain. But what it really does, it often makes it worse. One, they continue to create this unsafe, unhealthy space, both around themselves and any family members that are in the home with them. And two, they never really allow themselves to deal with that pain that's causing it. They never allow themselves to feel and to experience the discomfort that that pain can bring when they decide that they're going to deal with it and work their way through it. So we don't heal by placing a wall or a fort around ourselves, do we? We can lock ourselves away, but we're not ever going to let anything in when we do that. We begin to heal when we begin to tear down the walls of that fort by allowing room for that pain to come in, for that pain of whatever it is we're dealing with to begin to enter into those walls. And allowing that pain is allowing that broken heart. It's allowing all of those raw emotions. We begin to allow ourselves to feel in that pain. Those raw emotions we allow ourselves to experience in that pain. And when we do, bodhicitta is present in that moment. So something else also begins to happen when we allow ourselves to feel, when we allow ourselves to experience that broken heart. We begin to grow stronger. We begin to realize our own power, and we begin to experience what it truly means to work through that broken heart and what that means to our spiritual growth as we begin to work through that broken heart. And with that, we grow stronger. Now, Ms. Chadron says this. She says, but if we gradually increase our capacity to be present with our pain and sufferings of the world, we will surprise ourselves with our growing sense of courage. In our practice of cultivating a broken heart, we can incrementally build the strength and skill to handle more and more. Now, this doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. She's not promising us this painless process. It does mean that our feelings aren't going to ebb and flow. It doesn't mean that we're going to feel like Superman and Superwoman all the time. It's also important to know that during this time when we open ourselves to this broken heart, that we're also going to connect to that part of our broken heart that also longs to help others, to help alleviate suffering that's in the world. We're going to learn that we start to grow stronger with our interconnectedness or our oneness and our interconnectedness with each person and each being that's on this planet. So Ms. Chadron suggests that we should ask ourselves a very important question. And that question is, does it matter? For instance, we all catch ourselves when we're about to act out of alignment with our oneness, don't we? Whether we're about to send a nasty email, we're mad, so we're going to fire off this nasty email. We get snappy with somebody online, or we make a rude comment to somebody on social media. Lord knows that I do it. I'm just going to admit it. Now, I admit that quite often on Sundays. Sometimes I'm angry over a post I read, and I type something out, and I hit that enter button. But I still catch myself, even if only subconsciously, because it doesn't feel good when I do that. It doesn't feel right in here when you do that. It's being reactive rather than responsive, and it doesn't feel right. Will my comment cause harm? Maybe, maybe not. What, however, does it set into motion when I do that? Likely, Maybe there's going to be other rude comments that follow my own. People are going to see mine and be like, oh man, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon. We're going to let this person have it. Or maybe it stirs up others to just, start firing off or feel, kind of make their day start to spiral down. This happens enough times and that impact can start to stretch. It can start to reach pretty far. Maybe my comment is adding to a bad day that someone's already having. Or maybe that person reads my comment and goes home angry and takes it out on their family or their friends. Our book says when we ask ourselves, does it matter? We can first look at the outer, more obvious results of our actions. Okay, so there's the result, that effect that our actions have on others. But what about ourselves? What kind of results can it have on ourselves when we act out of that alignment? What effects might our actions have on ourselves? So Ms. Shadron goes on to say we can go deeper by examining how we are affecting our own mind. So what is it that we're making a habit in our lives? Are we going to start cultivating habits that we want to shed? That sounds a little counterintuitive. We don't start biting our nails if it's something we don't want to do. What kind of people do we want to appear to be to others? Do we want to lead by example? Of course, our essence is the essence of God. So we are inherently good. We know this. This never changes no matter how we act. Our essence is still essence of God, so we are inherently good. But we also get a choice as to whether or not we act in such a way, whether we act from that goodness that we are. I also think that strengthening behaviors we don't want can probably interfere just a little bit with our spiritual paths, with any spiritual awakening that's taking place. Part of spiritual awakening is to align our behaviors with oneness and with our inherent goodness. So that we can then begin to ask ourselves another question. What awakens in my heart and what blocks that process from happening? So she mentions a word in the book that we are all likely familiar with, whether we've studied Buddhist teachings or not, and that word is karma. Now, she's not using it in ways that we've likely heard it used before. Someone does this or that to you, and you just can't wait for them to get that karma. You can't wait to really just see the universe, just sock it to them. She mentions karma more as cause and effect, a little bit lighter. Cause and effect, action and reaction, in a bit of a less harsh way. Think about it like this. Think about present circumstances for a moment, present circumstances in your own life. Most likely they are the result of our past actions. Someone might be sitting in jail for robbing a store, and there is a cause and an effect to that. Karma is something we set up for ourselves, and it doesn't mean it's always the universe socking it to us. It's not necessarily what it means. It really more so means that our actions right now, what we choose to do right now in this moment, impacts our future. Obviously we can't change the past, but we can change what's going on right now, which eventually has effects into the future. Now she mentions if we want to learn about our future, we should look at what we're doing now. And she goes on to say what we do right now will help create that future. And she mentions how our actions right now will affect others in the future also. When she says, which is not just our own future, but a future we share with many others. And we see that right now with the way we treat the planet, with things such as global warming. Those things that we do right now will affect future generations. So karma could be something along those lines as well. And if you're like me, you're probably saying, well, Evan, that sounds all well and good, and I'd like to sure learn how to do this. So tell me how. Well, maybe some of you will like this, maybe some of you won't, but we exercise. And I'm not suggesting we do jumping jacks and get up and run around the sanctuary, or for those of you at home around your living rooms. We exercise and we retrain the mind. You might be able to do jumping jacks in the mind. I don't know. We'll have to work on that together maybe, but anyway. But none of us here have a crystal ball, probably. We don't have a crystal ball that we're going to be able to look into and tell us what exactly is going to happen when we leave here today. We don't know what tweets we may read that set us off over the course of the next few days. We can't predict how we're going to feel about certain things that happen or that come up, but we can control how we react to some of those things. We can begin to train the mind to ask a question before we react to something. Does it matter? Because those three words serve as a reminder that we do have a choice in how we respond in any given moment. Does it matter? I mean, we're going to experience unwelcome moments in our lives. Probably more than we would like. If you're in this human experience, still they're going to come. And it's not even in how we respond to other people. It can come in the form of choices. That cigarette that the doctor told us to cut out. We pick one up anyway, knowing we shouldn't have it. Leaving, whether or not to leave that abusive relationship. Those types of things. Our book tells us any experience can be made into a further blockage or can become a way of freeing ourselves. So we can train our minds. We can do this by remembering the breath from our meditation, maybe pausing to stretch, walking around the block, just stepping back for a moment for any situation that maybe makes us feel a little triggered. Whatever we do, we're retraining our minds to how we respond in any given moment. Because when we do this, we're beginning to interrupt, as Ms. Chadron states, the process of escalating our suffering in the exact same habitual way over and over and over. So most of us have probably had a habit that we wanted to get rid of some time or the other. I used to bite my nails. That was a habit I wanted to get rid of. But it took a while. Habits don't just die quickly. Has anybody in here ever tried to give up sugar? Oh, I knew somebody else in here would. I mean, it's difficult. Mindy and I went on this 3-day sugar fast once. I mean, we both had headaches. We were reactive. I mean, we were snapping at each other. We're like, we better stay in the house. Thank goodness I didn't have a church then. People would have thought, who's that rude guy up there? But it was tough. But whatever they are, those habits, they like to hang on, don't they? But we don't have to go all in right away when we break habits. Giving up sugar cold turkey can be difficult, and maybe you've had better luck with it, I don't know. But it's great if you can, but we also must remember to celebrate those small victories along the way. Maybe I bypass adding that lump of sugar to my coffee one morning. Whatever it is, we can start small and we can do it the next day, and then just add a few things as we go along until we can eventually fully break that habit. So Ms. Chadron states, it does indeed matter what we do, say, and even think. And we know about that think, because Unity teachings, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. But she says everything counts. Everything leaves an imprint in our minds. But at the same time, there's plenty of room for us to relax and to appreciate what life has to offer. Asking, does it matter? And working with something called PU is a gentle but effective method for working with our karma and gradually transforming our mind and its habits. So we can make the choice at any time to change anything in our lives. That's the beauty of it. We always all have choice. Our futures aren't carved in stone. We always have choices to make. And it doesn't require us to trying to learn to swim, to just jump directly into the deep end of the pool and swim like an Olympic gold medalist. It just simply requires us to start where we are. Maybe we first dip our toe in the water till we get a little comfortable. It does often require us to welcome those things that we would probably initially rather avoid. We have to be willing to sometimes feel uncomfortable. We don't grow when we're comfortable. It requires us to often feel uncomfortable. Giving up some of those old habits, they make us feel a little grumpy, or like we may have to stay away from people for a couple of days. And they may make us feel really vulnerable and really exposed. But it's necessary if we really want to do the work. And we must remember to think before we do and to ask ourselves those 3 words, does it matter? Because at the end of the day, it truly does. It really does matter. So this is the beginning of the book study, and we're going to delve more into this stuff as we go along together. So if you haven't joined a small group, it should have been in the e-blast, definitely choose one of those groups and contact one of the group facilitators and join. If you're new or if you're watching online and you haven't yet joined a group, please email the office or call the church office. The email is office@unityofmadison.org. And we can get you fixed up in a small study group because, lots of times those small study groups, this is really where it's at. This is where we bond with each other. This is where we have these wonderful discussions. So please consider getting the book and joining one of those groups if you haven't already. There are study guides on the table right there to the left as you exit the sanctuary, or there's a digital copy online that we can send you or that is linked to in our e-news. So please do that. Please consider joining one if you haven't already. So, namaste. We also have one more week of our survey that Denny and Raimi have put together and put out there. So please participate in that survey. We're wanting, some of this stuff probably won't happen until post-COVID. Some of it can happen before, but we're looking at ways we can expand our community just outside of the church walls. We want to expand it out into Madison. Let's let all of Madison and even surrounding areas know what we've got going on here. We've got some good stuff going on here, and I think it's too good for us not to share. So please participate in that survey. It's online. It's linked in the e-news, or there is a paper survey again on that table as you exit. You can fill out that paper survey and put it under the office door. We'd love to hear from you one more week for that. So please take part in that if you haven't already. All right, so now I would like to invite you to join me as we bless our children and our youth ed that's taking place on Zoom right now.